那在我们正式的节目开始之前，我想要稍微提醒大家，我们订阅制的连结就在我们现在 show note 下面咯。那你可以看一下我们一些 detail 一些详细的介绍，但是3月9号11点30分，也就是接近中午的时候就会开始的开卖。那也希望大家能够现在就点进去看一下我们订阅制会提供什么。So really hope you guys like it and enjoy the show today. 很久之前我们做了一个单元，专门在教大家如何应对这些不礼貌的客人。但这一年陆陆续续有很多学生跟听众问我们该如何应对这些失控的客户，尤其是在开会的时候。那今天就让我们来分享几个技巧。Hello， 欢迎来到 Executive Plus 主管与沟通力的 Podcast。I'm Sherry, an educator, certified coach, and style enthusiast. 我相信专业有效的沟通是语言跟逻辑的完美结合。
And I'm Nick, a startup consultant, corporate trainer, and late-night gaming junkie. I believe great communication requires the right mindset and solid frameworks.
我们希望带给大家职场英语的技能、跨文化沟通技巧与其他能帮助您成为出色领导者的工具。
Join us each week as we share our experience, research, and methodologies to take your communication and language skills from good to great. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Executive Plus podcast. Now, today's episode, we want to cover something that almost started our podcast. It's a topic that we lightly touched upon back in episode 8 and shared our personal experiences, but it's that idea of how do you deal with a customer who goes full emotional on you? And while we support being emotional, being true to how you feel, we're talking about negative emotion, potentially yelling or being verbally abusive to you.
我们在第8集的时候做了一个单元，也就是要怎么样去面对这种傲客。就是如果你是在做 retail 的，那你在店里面你一定会碰到像这样的人。所以那集讲完之后呢，我就发现我陆陆续续去教学的时候，或者是有些听众就会开始问，那如果他在公司开会的时候，有的时候你在做一些 negotiation 或者是在讨论一些 contract 的东西嘛，有可能就会碰到这些问题。那如果对方他真的开始无理取闹，或者他非常的失控，你该怎么样来去回应他
？Before we get into the steps, we just want to clarify is that this episode is not just about what to say, but it's actually the thought process of what to think and how to move forward to get a more positive result.
没错，那当然我们在讲沟通的时候，有很多是心态跟一些逻辑。那尤其是在这种失控的这种场面的时候，尤其是面对对方很失控的时候，这个是我们心态也很重要的。但是我们所教的这一些不只是语言，而是 how you want to face the situation， 而且你们共同的这个目标是什么。当我们共同目标都很希望是有个很正面的，可能你们正式的完成了这个 project， 或还正式的 negotiate 了这个 contract, right? So again, like it's for the positive results. It's really not just about what you say, it's really about how you want to face the situation.
So throughout this episode, we've actually looked at quite a bit of research. Some of those research will be in the show notes. We've tried to simplify it down to a few key ideas. Now, the first idea is to acknowledge the other side's feelings. Easier said than done.
Yeah.
Most of the time when someone starts getting angry or abuse you, we go into defensive mode, we build the wall. Even for myself, I have sometimes like a scorched earth policy, which is if I know that I have all the facts to be right and then someone just starts going off or going nuts, my first thing is just to start pulling out things and be like, oh, we're going to do this.
Yeah, but I think that's everyone's kind of immediate reaction, right? Okay, you want to fight? Let's fight.
Like gloves on.
Yeah. 那当然我们在公司的时候一定要，我们希望有 positive result, right? That was our goal. So acknowledging someone's feeling 也就是同理人家的这种感受。So 我们的句子其实很简单。For example, oh, I understand the situation is so frustrating for you. I know this is a very sensitive subject and that you're worried about your business or you're worried about your contract. Then I understand that this must cause you a lot of stress.
And this technique comes a lot from coaching, from facilitation. We've talked a lot about Chris Voss on this show. He talks about this a lot, like labeling. That if you hear a lot of feelings and you give it a label, for example, I understand this is frustrating for you, or I understand this is causing you stress and concern, this creates two situations. One is that the person feels heard. A lot of the time, the reason that people get angry or frustrated is because they don't feel heard. But the second is that it also gives a chance to clarify. Maybe they're not frustrated. Maybe they're angry. Maybe they're not actually angry. They're just frustrated. So by labeling these things, it gives them an option to be clear about how they feel.
So speaking of being clear, 那这个时候我们也可以来做一个叫做 active listening. 那 active listening 到底是什么呢？ For example, asking question for clarification, right? 这个时候我们就可以问一些 WH question, 然后去请求对方再来解释一下。So Nick mentioned Chris Voss. We talked about him so many times on our podcast, and he talked about this a lot as the calibrated question, 也就是我们的 what, the WH question.
And when you're asking these questions to clarify, or in this case also repeating their points, again, you're showing that you are listening.
Yeah.
And this is often what makes that separation between they're having conversation A, you're having conversation B. You're not at all on the same page. So you could argue all day and no one will move because your framing or your thought process is that A is important. Their thought process is B is important. So when you go into active listening, it's actually finding that. And when you repeat their points, you show it's like, I understand where you're coming from. Then you have an opportunity to shift maybe the frame or the conversation to what you think needs to be done.
Yeah.
And that gets into step 3 of finding common ground.
Yeah. So I just wanted to give a little bit of example about repeating their points. Now, repeating their points, 我们也可以把这个叫做 mirroring, right? Chris Voss had that term. For example, 如果今天你的客户在说 You know, I think the price is just too high. 那我们要 repeat 的是什么？你可以就说 The price is too high. That's it. 你就是 repeat 他这一句，那这个人听到了之后，他就会开始去解释他所谓的 price is too high 是什么意思。他可能说 You know, I'm going through this, we have a really tight budget, and my boss is not going to agree with this. And you can say tight budget. Again, 他就会开始去解释什么意思，他的这个 tight budget 是什么意思。So I think this is where the repeating what their point is, it really comes very useful.
Right. And this is about getting them to output more information, but without sounding like you're investigating someone. A lot of times, if you don't use a mirroring technique and you maybe just go straight for why, be like, why is that too high? Why do you think? Then it gets defensive. But by using the mirroring technique and be like, oh, it's too high. Then they will not feel like they're being investigated or that you're questioning their motives. Maybe they will just start explaining and you can start moving forward.
Now, the next thing that we suggest is to find that common ground. 那么刚刚在最前面 disclaimer 有讲到，我们当然在公司工作一定都很希望有个很 positive result， 可能是这个 project 要很完成的落幕啊，或者是你真的要非常成功的把这个 contract 谈好，那这些就是我们所谓的 common ground, like common goal, I would say. Yeah.
So your common ground is partially created by what you want to accomplish and what they want to accomplish, but also back to that first piece of acknowledging their feelings is you may say something, I think we can agree the result from this project did not go as expected. I know we're both eager to find a mutually beneficial solution. If we both want to get the best result, I think we need to rethink the plan together.
Or, I know that we both really want to resolve this as soon as possible. 也就是我觉得这个步骤有点是 realign 大家的一个 goal 是什么，因为这个时候大家可以变得很 emotional 的时候，你的 direction 就会完完全全就不一样了。It's everywhere. But if you're finding that common ground, common goal, you're pulling things together.
And this is another good place to show your active listening or that you heard what the other side said. And reframe a conversation back to a common ground. So you can say like earlier, I heard that this is really important to you. The schedule and making sure we're done in 3 months is really important to you. But I think that the quality of our work will be affected if we speed it up. How do we find somewhere that fits both schedule and quality? So again, is if your framing or your concerning point was different, like maybe they think price was important, but you think schedule is important, or it's about speed versus quality. This is the time that you start to go, I heard you talk about this, but I think this. Where do these things come together?Right.
所以必须要说，当然我们刚刚讲这几个重点，不是说 step 1, step 2, step 3, 这些都是你同时间要看情况。You have to keep on practicing the active listening, clarification, common ground, and then go back, active listening, right?
Yeah, this is definitely more of a process than a step by step. You're not going to complete at step 3. It's more like, okay, I acknowledge their feelings. I do active listening. I try and find common ground. If I can't find common ground,go back to acknowledge what they are saying, active listening with clarification, try and find common ground. And what you'll find is that you may, in the first cycle, not placate their feelings. They may not come down off of the anger or the frustration or whatever. But if you go through this cycle a few times, again, you'll get back to that more reasonable, we can have a real discussion.
Right. 那当然了，这些的 conversation 当中 try to stay with the facts.Fact 也就是你们之前的 email exchange 上面所写的一些时间啊 pricing 或者是你们 contract 上面已经有的 information. Staying with the facts really help you again to stick with what you guys are trying to achieve at the end and not on the emotion because when the other person is really emotional, I may get very emotional, 我觉得这种的一定是互相会影响的. But if you stay with the fact, it's a lot easier to get to that actual conversation.
And the other idea behind staying behind the fact is keeping it on this conversation. A lot of times when we get emotional, other factors may come in. Now, if this is a long-standing client relationship, other issues like, back then on that project, I let it go when you did blah, blah, blah. That doesn't solve this current situation. And so making sure that you can come back and be like, if you have frustration with that, I'm very happy to talk about it later, but we need to finish this contract today. Or if this bothers you, we can handle that at another time. Can we get back to this? It's about keeping it down. And what you will find is that people who feel like they cannot get what they want, their first inclination is I will just shift the frame or shift the topic elsewhere. So by making sure you're straight with your facts and what you want to accomplish, you can constantly come back.Absolutely.
我觉得自己要非常的确定你现在这个 conversation 的目标是在哪里 OK， 不要被对方一直去拉走了 I think that's really important。 那我们现在要讲的这个又是有点稍微不一样的 situation 了。我发现在这1年当中，有的时候我教书的时候，学生就会问，如果对方啊，他真的是已经失控到他飙脏话，他丢东西，因为其实这种事情也真的会发生，尤其是我们如果在台湾，我们有时候跟很多不同国家的做生意，对方的文化可能跟我们不太一样。那我现在不想讲太多关于比如说性别歧视啦，但是这种东西一定会发生。有某一些文化它可能不是那么尊重女性 maybe this happens， 那你要怎么样去 deal with in that kind of situation？ 之前在那个第8单元 I can't believe I'm saying episode 8 because it's such a long time ago， But I mentioned a story back then, 也就是我在 Burberry 的时候上班。那有一次呢，就有2个人进来跟我好像订了一个鞋子，但是他们也没有说什么，也没有交钱，他们就又走了。就后来呢，那双鞋子因为卖得太好了，就被卖掉了，马上就被卖光了。结果因为他们没有缴钱，也没有讲很清楚，所以他们回来发现鞋子不见的时候呢，他开始飙脏话 ，like everything you could possibly imagined, I've received all those, basically being abused verbally. 我当场就是非常的害怕，那个时候真的是很年轻啊，也没什么太多的经验，超级害怕，然后我开始躲在后面哭I cried my eyeballs out. But what I did is I phoned a customer service representative. 那我们那时候公司里面一定都会有专门 handle 像这样子的一些状况的人。So he told me, Sherry, you do not have to talk to these people at all. 因为他们现在是非常 emotional, 非常失控的状态，你完全都不用跟他们讲话，你只要说声谢谢，然后把他们，你就请你们公司的 HR 或是公司的一些另外的人，那或者如果你是女性，你觉得有点害怕的话，这个时候你就请你的男同事进来，或者是请你老板，其实都可以的。就是你这个时候你不需要硬着头皮去面对这些 verbal assault 或 verbal abuse， 你是可以take a pause. And you could actually just say that, this is not acceptable behavior. I am not going to speak with you. I'm not going to do business with you like this. Or you can say, we do not tolerate profanity. If you have any further questions, please contact somebody else.
Especially if someone is swearing at you or being verbally abusive, this is not something you have to tolerate. And a lot of times, unless the person is just completely unreasonable, when people come off of that level of anger, they'll usually feel really bad. Now, not everyone will, but if they don't, then, consider if you want to be in business with that person.
That's a good sign, a giant red flag.
Yeah. But especially the first one is sometimes people just have that button and they blow up. And if your intent is still to continue the relationship, that first thing you said is, I would like to work with you, but this is not acceptable. You can contact me when you're ready to talk.
Yeah.
And then just walk away.
Yeah. Really, you need to set boundary, 也就是你要给自己一个非常好的一个界限，因为这个人如果这个是他的 behavior, okay, this may happen again. If you don't set that boundary, this is going to happen again and again and again.
Right. And this is where it gets into if you start yelling back, using profanities back, they will now think that this is an acceptable way to do it because you did it back to me. So this is now equal ground. It's very hard to do, but the most important thing to do is just set that boundary right there. Like, no, this is not how we do business. You want to talk? We can talk later.
Yeah. So really hope that these tips and tricks really help you guys in facing this kind of situation. I know it's hard. 我觉得 it's going to be hard every single time. Right? 没有一个人会觉得没事啊。So, I mean, I still think, sometimes it's challenging for me, but just really hope that these tips can help you guys understand how to navigate, especially in a very difficult situation.
We hope this helps, and we'll talk to you guys next time.
Bye.
Bye.
The Executive Plus podcast is a Presentality Group production, produced and hosted by Sherry Fang and Nick Howard. You can search us on Facebook, 主管英文 Executive Plus. You can also find us on Instagram, Communication R&D, and email us at sherry@epstyleplus.com.